Okay. I asked you to come because we talk a lot about different things, and I found out about this opportunity because there's some. I mean, like growing up here in Chicago, like I grew up in South suburbs, and I went to fairly decent schools. I went to Mount Carmel, then Thornwood. It was mostly parochial schools. Um, but then when I came back to Chicago and stuff like that, and became a teacher, I was always in the urban setting in Chicago charter schools primarily. I've worked sometimes out in like the suburbs in like a high school and a junior high setting. And one of the junior highs that I was at in the south suburbs is like I was asked to go out there by a former coworker, um, and then just to set up like what that city is like. It's a pretty affluent area. Has been since I was a kid, and so like the racial or the diversity there wasn't always that way when I was younger. But then because it's a good neighborhood, more and more people of color moved out there, and so there was more and more influx of students from the city in the school. And so my friend asked me to come out there because I did have a lot of experience uh, as a special educator with building up relationships, but also dealing with students of that variety and also helping out colleagues with that because the population of teachers there was about 25 or 30 of them. I don't know exactly for sure, but they had start there almost 20 years ago when the district first started, when it was affluent. And like, just to give you like for Teacher Appreciation Week, he would say that like they had, like the students had parents that worked for all the major sports organizations. So he got like, for Teacher Appreciation Week, he got like box seats to the Bulls, White Sox, Blackhawks, like all the major sports teams, and would come home with like just this treasure trove of things. It's just like one of the things that he told me about is just like that. But now, with the influx of new students, they also had a new superintendent and they created new curriculum. Well, they brought in a new curriculum. It's very good. You're a math teacher, and so just talking about curriculum, I know we don't use this at the school we're at now, but it was an inquiry-based curriculum. So the idea is this: you give the students, you have them work in cooperative groups of four, right? And when you make your cooperative groups, what do you typically do with those students?
Based off skill level.
Right. So you have one high, some mediums, and one low.
Right.
And the idea is what? The high person does what?
Help the other ones.
Right. And so with that concept, this is the premise of this math, right? And so they brought in this great curriculum. It was a lot, and because I have a master's in science and I've worked in schools and was taught from IITs, like inquiry-based educators about inquiry, I was really perfect for this job because I knew about inquiry-based learning and about how to, implement it. And so, with the premise of that, like I said, you want highs with some mediums and some lows.
Right.
But, and also too, another thing about this, because of the teacher buildup, they have a very strong union. They also had a very strong parent council that really helped like set things up for students and stuff like that. They, when they set things up though, when we're trying to make change here for positive, like, because if you looked at their scores, they were worse than the ones that at our school. They just weren't. They were really low.
Right.
Their achievement levels were low, like overall. Now they did have high achieving students there. They had kids like their high honors. They took days for in the math class. They went to the high school to learn for some of their math classes. But they also, the way they were set up before the new curriculum, they had an honors curriculum for honors math students, and then they had just the regular curriculum for the other students. And as a special educator, I was brought in there to co-teach with 3 different math teachers, which can be a challenge in itself because
I know.
you have to build relationships with all 3 people and plan with all 3 people and implement this curriculum. So yeah, and then with the curriculum we had, it was brand new by the district with our new superintendent, and they had the setup was pretty good and it worked out. We would plan it up, but like I said, these teachers have been here for a while and they didn't really like change. They weren't really sold on the curriculum because they've never seen something like this before. And so they were a little bit reluctant for things. So I had to really sell the curriculum to them on a daily basis. And we would spend like an hour planning on this is how we implement it. I had to try and explain what the base concepts were that they're trying to get to, because you introduce this concept that wasn't really like you had to, it wasn't like so clear cut, like what the skill was. They told you, but it's like, they're overlapping skills and it's a lot of different things like that. So I would have to sell them on implementing it, and we would plan it out for an hour or whatever I had with the teachers to plan with, and then we would implement it. And it was really great and it was fun because it was activities. You started the lesson off with activities, a lot of like cutting and doing different like hands-on manipulatives and stuff like that. And they even had group tests where like the 4 people would test together, and whatever it was the score that they got, you know. And so that was a really new concept too, to where it's just like, oh wait, I want to be able to get my own grade and stuff like that. But it's like, but think about that concept. In today's workforce, don't you have to work with a group?
Yeah, but we all get paid differently.
Yeah, we all get paid differently, but a lot of times that's, you know, that's based off of other inequities in our system where, you know, just because you're a woman, you're going to get paid less than me. And also because you're a woman of color, you're probably going to get paid less than me, which is not fair. But it's also a systemic inequality, right?
Right.
But ideally, it should be like, hey, we're working on this team. We're producing a product, and we were able to get this product together, right? So that's the basis of this math system too.
Right.
And so the superintendent said this curriculum is for the honors and the regular kids. So think about it like this, like you're the parent, and I have my kids in honors, and there were some students of color in there, but primarily most of the white students were in these honor classes, and mostly the students of color were not. They were in the regular classes. And so those honors classes, the students got the exact same curriculum. So if you were a parent, I say, like, if I came to you and said, like, look, your honors curriculum is the exact same curriculum as the regular class, right? Probably be a little upset.
Exactly.
But if I said that I'm introducing a curriculum to where your child can be a leader in the classroom, and they're going to be able to help students, and they'll have metacognitive thinking about it because they're teaching other students,
Right.
you'd be on board with it.
Sound better. Right.
Sound better, right? Because that's the concept it is. But, and then if you're the student who struggles, saying, look, he's going to be paired up with a peer who's going to be able to help him understand the concepts, and he's going to be able to elevate your son's achievement or daughter's achievement, right?
Right.
You would be on board with that too.
Right.
So why the district didn't get rid of honors and put all the kids together is beyond me, because becomes a status thing where it's just like, oh, my kid's in honors.
True.
And so inside the school system, we already create this inequalities. It's all over the world in our education systems where my kid had honors this and had high honors that or IB this and all these other different things. But we created a system, a little stratification where it's just like, you're better than this other student. And so you don't need to be with them because you're going to be lower because of it.
Right.
Have you ever thought about it like
I didn't
that?
even think of that, but it did bring back when I was a kid. I think it starts at home because I think about from when I was growing up how my mom was working all these jobs. She worked for the post office and she had other jobs. I just didn't understand it. But there was never, like, education wasn't stressed. It was sports, right? So sports was stressed. But considering that I grew up in the inner city, my mom took me to the suburbs. I went to high school in Summit. And even in order to be on these sports, you had to have good grades. So now I'm learning that, okay, now I have to have good grades. Then I knew I was athletic. Then I'm on this volleyball team. I'm the only black girl on the volleyball team. This is foreign to me, but it's a family. So it taught me something different, considering that my mom grew up in a different time. So her thought process was, these people are different, they're racist, and all these different things. And I don't think I was rebellious. I just think I had my own mind. So I would say, like, I'm not experiencing that. Like, I didn't allow her to put her experiences on me. So when I was in school, I didn't have the mistreatment or the racism or anything like that. I never experienced that in high school. So I was always focused on education. My counselor was my guidance counselor was my coach, and half of my teachers were coaches. So education was a big thing, and I just couldn't understand why my mom didn't push that. But when you were just talking, I'm thinking, okay, maybe she was in that situation where when you grow up a certain type of way, it's already a mindset. Because like you said, the honors kids were majority white, and so it's like they already superior. And so as a kid, not intentionally, but you begin to have this mindset like, well, this race is better because this is how I was raised. And it's like, no, that's not really it. But I really began to think, like, because when I was in high school, I was 15 when I got pregnant. I had a baby when I was 16. But I just knew that I couldn't be a statistic because that was the thing. You get pregnant, young black girl from the hood, get pregnant, won't graduate high school. But my teammates, 98% different race because they were all different, but really supporting me. Like, what do you need? What's this? What's that? So it gave me a different perspective in my high school. But when I got out to the real world, I realized that was just a good moment of my life that I had this group of people to come together to help me do what I need to do, because I see it differently. And even in my master's program, I see it completely different.
Yeah, I could see that. Like, I was a young father too,
Yeah.
when I was just graduating high school and stuff like that. And I definitely didn't have that support network. If it wasn't for my parents, like, kicking me out and stuff like that, where I had to go move in with her mom and stuff, and basically just like one time getting yelled at by her mom and just like, I got to get my act together and take care of things better.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a whole lot of support. So I had to be my own support and take care of her and the baby. That's why I joined the Army. But yeah, I could see that. But like, and I could see that your situation too. Do you ever felt like maybe they might have been saying things, but it seemed like they were very supportive? So maybe.
I don't think so, because to be real transparent, my oldest daughter, I didn't teach her anything. You know how you're supposed to teach basic name, sight words, things like that. One of my teammates' mom was a kindergarten teacher. So she would have her most of the time. So especially like when we had AAU tournaments in the summer, she would have my daughter. She taught her all those things. As my mom would be mad, like, you're sending her over here with all these white people. They've never ever mistreated me, never mistreated my daughter. Actually, I still talk to them today. I was the only black at their wedding. Didn't feel any different, and I think that I had to experience that, because if I didn't, I would have had the same mindset as my mom, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I'm real grateful about that, because it gave me a different perspective, and it taught me how to have my own brain, right? And so I teach my kids the same thing, which it allows me to teach the kids in the school the same thing. You got to think for yourself. The way that I think or the way that I see things is just my perception based off of my experience. So the way you think and the way you feel about things is based off your experience, but it doesn't mean it's right, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because, like, with my background, too, as a special educator, I had a lot of psychology classes, and I've always been an observer. Like, I always observe people, and, like, if we're in a social gathering, I'll be sitting back and I'm observing. So I'm observing people, and I understand their behaviors and why they do things. And so I always taught my kids that, like, look, you have to judge people on what they do for you and how they react to you, and it's just like, you should treat them all fairly until they do something negatively against you. And so I think that's we've talked before, like how in my family, I have a lot of trouble with, like, my relatives down in the South because of the racist things they say.
Yeah. And
about their ideologies for things. And, like, both my daughters date people, and it's not based off of race. They're interracial relationships and stuff like that. My granddaughter is a young Latino girl. And so it's like being able to see that and teach them those things, even though I didn't really, like, expressly do that about race, but it's just like, I think they always knew, because I'd always bring them into my schools and stuff like that, and they would see things and even practice with our volleyball team and stuff like that. And it gave them these enriching experiences to where they were able to see people for who they are and how they're similar. I think that just also, too, to go back and, like, wrap up about that one school where it's just like, I couldn't stay there because I couldn't handle being around that, like, and you've experienced similar things too, but it's like, you plan with your co-teacher and you go in the next day and you're ready, you have a game plan. You're getting ready to teach these students based off what you did.
Yeah.
And then you go in there, you walk in the room and they say, well, I decided to go with something else. It's like, why did we just talk for an hour yesterday, plan out everything? I cut manipulatives, I did all this stuff, and we're not going to do it. And the reason why they did that was because they didn't think that they were smart enough to do it. And that was the injustice. Because those honors kids, they thought they could do it with their honors kids because they could handle it. And they felt that these other kids couldn't. Now, granted, there were some behavior problems, but when you limit the number of classes they could go into, and you end up having classes where there's a majority of kids who do have difficulty learning and have difficulty behaving in those settings, imagine if they were able to break up the honors classes, put them all together, and every single class was equally distributed.
Right.
They would be able to, one, my co-teachers would have been on board better. Two, the learning would have been more evident because we would have been able to see things. And those honors kids are going to be really enriched because they might be teaching these concepts, or they'll be exposed to a different take. Just how your background was different and my background is different. But when we come together and we collaborate, we bring different elements to that concept and see that somebody can go at it in a different way. There's not just one way.
Right.
And that was the problem, too, when I go in these classes. And then, like, I know that we're in a PBS station, but he had one of those NPR voices that could put you to sleep. Like, it was just, like, so low, lulled. And he wanted to lecture for, like, 30 minutes. I'm, like, going, dude, this is math class. You shouldn't lecture that long. We should be doing this work.
Yeah.
You know, and then I go into the other lady's room and she would be like really strict and like with a firm grip on things. It's just like, okay, you know, you have to let them explore this a little bit. You can't just micromanage every single thing, you know, and just like, they were good people. They just didn't see the things because they didn't have, I mean, they literally started in this school. It's the only school they had experience with. They only seen it go change with the diversity of it. And so, and then that goes back to the case too. Like, look, I have 22 years teaching experience.
Yeah.
But if I go to any school district, even suburban schools and stuff like that, I'm only going to get like 7 or 8 years of pay on their scale.
Yeah.
It's one of the only career fields where you are like that, because we're not valued as educators, because those previous experiences don't seem like value. And then when we go back to it, we have a nationwide system where the schools are better because of the money that's in the property at that area.
Yeah.
And so how can our schools get better if we don't break down those barriers for where the money comes from?
I say that I think, even considering that I'm a special ed teacher as well, I think that using, like you was just talking about, experiences with our students, right? If I based off my experience, allowing them to share their experience, right, in a way that they want to learn, or the way they feel is best, I think is very important. I do feel like you are excluded. There's a lot of teachers at our school are excluded, but it's a lot of teachers that's like, oh, I've been doing this for so many years. This is the way. This is the only way, and this is how I'm going to teach. And then you lose the kids, and then we have like, oh, this kid is not retaining this information. It's like, no, they don't learn like that, and you didn't take the time out to see how they learn so that they can master this concept. And I think that it goes back to the education when in school, because based off my experience, I went to this school, so this got to be right because this university is this. It's like, okay, that's how you was taught in school. However, that was like 30 years ago. So things have changed. I appreciate your education and your degree and your hard work, but now we have to continue to learn as educators as well, learning new ways to reach our kids, to reach so that they can understand, so we can stop putting them in a box, so we can stop categorizing them based off what they didn't remember because you didn't teach it right. And I think that's one thing I'm grateful for at my school is if my scholars don't remember something, I always say, it's me. Like, what did I do? What do you think I should do? I always have a outlet to go to see what is it that I can improve so that they're able to learn what they need to learn to be successful. Yeah,
you, as a teacher, I found that that's like key, where a lot of times it's like colleagues, stuff like that, like, oh, well, they're just not smart or this or that. And it's just like, you have to reflect and go back, like, look, if it's on me, you know, and that, what did I do wrong? Analyze the assessment that I gave them. How was it? Did it match how we learned? Is it matching up with what we're doing? You know, and that's like the challenge, where you have to change things up and realize, like, is it me? What did I do wrong? How do I need to change that better and be reflective of it? And because that's where you get those things, where you have to make those changes. And that's like the difficult part. I mean, even I've been criticized lately about it, where it's just like they don't, you know, like it's like I change things up for my students so that they have different ways of mastering things. And if they get it wrong the first time, then we go back through it and they fix it and get mastery of it. Because that's what's more important. Or do they demonstrate mastery? They might not have demonstrated mastery, but it's not like I'm supposed to punish them forever and say, you got an F on this, and that's what you are. No, I need you to master the skill, so I'm going to keep on going at you multiple ways till you master that skill.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm curious about specific examples also of these limitations of educators that you've been noticing? So there was the example of the administration not thinking students were smart enough. I'm curious if there are other things that you guys have noticed lately where educators are limited in their own abilities or are limiting the students because of their biases.
I do believe that once so I work with ninth grade, and sometimes I think ninth grade are still middle schoolers, right? But sometimes you come in, they may have this behavior. Also, they also are impacted by COVID, right? We never experienced that, so we don't know how that behavior should look. So we don't have a rubric for how you should teach a kid that just went through COVID, spent all their time at home. I do think that some teachers hold behavior against the kid because your behavior is maybe I need attention doesn't mean I can't teach you, right? So if I can find out why this behavior is and how to use this behavior in a positive way, then I'm able to reach the kid, right? Or not. You have to be able to reach the kid in order to teach the kid. So I feel like a lot of teachers is like, oh, this kid's a trouble kid, based off maybe a meeting that they heard another teacher complain about or whatever. Doesn't mean that kid is going to have that same behavior with you. And I think that's the misconception. Instead of building a relationship, they already have this preconceived notion. So they wash their hands with the kid before they even get their hands dirty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that goes back to reflection about things.
Yeah.
I don't like, it was, in my bachelor's degree, it was very focused on reflection about things, like looking back at what you do. I don't think teachers are. And I think it's hard now because if you think about it, we have a government that says we need to push them towards this test. We have administrators trying to push them towards this and that. And then, it's like, oh, you got to get this filled out. You got to fill that. And we got to keep on moving. We got to get to this point at the end where we get pushed in one way. And it's just like, well, I ain't got time to redo this or redo that or be reflective of this. And, going to with a kid as a problem or a behavior, usually that's the one that I would focus on. And that's the one that I'm going to, it's like, look, I'm going to hold you accountable for what you do, but I'm going to be working on our relationship harder than I would anybody else's, because that's where I
Yeah.
I know if I could get him to be a learner in my room, then I can get everybody to be a learner in my room. And so I think that there's a lot of pressure from other outlets that force teachers to where I got to keep on moving. And then even sometimes, like reflection of this year in chemistry, we definitely weren't where we needed to be at the end of the year. And then I reflected on it and I said, like, look, talk to my co-teacher. I go, look, next year, we're not going to spend a month working on just relationship building and all this other stuff and these other skills for like basic science skills. I know because I teach 9th grade and 10th grade. So I go, I'm going to focus on that as a 9th grade teacher to give them those skills. And then as a 10th grade teacher, we're going to hit it running, we're going to hit it hard and just go so that we get to where they need to be. And we have to be have some grace with the curriculum because it's a good curriculum, but it's not standard as what it was, there's a lot of curriculums now and that's the hard part. I think that there's been some analysis about education, about neurology and stuff like that. And that information is not getting out like it should. But these new textbooks and curriculums are starting to develop, and the teachers who are getting it don't understand how to implement it because they've never been exposed to this and they've never taught this way or learned this way. So, does that where it makes sense where it's like, basically the idea is that you're overlapping concepts. You don't just show mastery, then move on to the next thing. You have to master this and move that. You show some mastery and it's going to overlap and layer and layer and layer until at the end, it all congeals together. Instead of just like put up this brick wall. oh, you weren't able to master this, you can't learn the next thing. There's no way.
Right.
Have you two seen a difference in your kids' experiences of the school system versus your experiences of it growing up?
Is there a difference? That's the question. I have. So I went to a school. My school had a lot of resources, a lot of resources for athletics, a lot of clubs, a lot of things. So we had home economics, a lot of electives. I don't think that kids now in the city school system are getting those resources. I don't think because AAU sports is extremely expensive. Kids from a certain community can't afford to do that, so they just stuck. So now we're wondering why the crime is high, because they're looking for something to do, and it's not affordable for them to do. Or we had camps, like after school, during the summer, for some things for us to do. I don't think it's the same. I think that our education has gone backwards. I feel like it's watered down. Our expectations are not high. I remember I was a sophomore, and my literature and rhetoric teacher, I had just had my daughter, and I only missed 1 week of school because I had her right before spring break. And I came back in, and my teacher's like, Tiff is the only one that did her work over spring break. I didn't have nothing else to do. But she's like, she's the only one that did her work over spring break. I was like, student of the month. That, lit a fire, because first I'm like, oh, I'm a kid, I'm in high school, I had a baby. But then coming back, being celebrated for something positive, not to say that my daughter was negative, but just the thought of a teen mom was frowned upon. But that's lit. So now it's like, man, I could do anything. Plus I got a kid and I just got acknowledged. So it's like, I feel like we don't celebrate certain things. We celebrate test scores. Like, I'm not a good test taker, but I can do my work. So are you telling me I'm not qualified because I can't take this test, but I'm able to execute the work? So I feel like we're celebrating not wrong things, because I feel like everything should be celebrated. We're not celebrating everyone. I think everyone deserves to be celebrated.
Yeah. And then, I would say too, I agree with what you said about athletics and after school programs and stuff like that, because we're both coaches, and we've seen it where we bring our teams to the sectionals and stuff like that. You can see there's a definite, there's also an athletic gap, achievement gap, comparative to even the academic achievement gap, because it's just the resources is one thing, but it's just you see, the athletics for things, or even sports and activities, kids, first time they ever see a volleyball might be in high school. And these other things where these other programs are up for kids all the way growing up through sports and stuff like that, where they're able to have access to these things, where a lot of kids in the city don't have that access anymore, because it's the fields aren't taken care of and everything else. It's just there's a lot of just issues, and just a lot of high schools are in old elementary schools, so the gyms are smaller than they need to be and stuff like that. So it just a lot of different resources. Whereas even you see programs I've taken my athletes to ESPN to a special talk about gun violence in the city, because that's another issue that's something that's very important to me. And it's just oh, we're going to come back do this every year. It's they never did it again. They never focus on those things. It just it's good enough for as Band-Aid, or talk about it, bring existence to it, but they don't put the resources in to handle the things that we need. And then it's good. It's refreshing to hear things about talking about giving resources, and then when the governments are talking about, well, we need more resources for these things, we need more social programs, and we need these things so we could develop that. Think about how our economy could be is if we treated everybody as equal and we spread out that wealth to where other people can have access to those resources. So not just your kid, but every other kid is able to get the kind of education that they deserve and refocus those things.
Yeah. Because I even think about because I was a 3-sport athlete going to other schools. When we looked good, we had the same shoes, same joggers, so we felt good, so we played good. When you come in somewhere, and this is me speaking from a personal experience, and someone else is put together, you're like, oh, they got to be good. And they may not even be good. They just look good, so now you're intimidated. So now you have defeated yourself before the war mentally. So I think that...
Or even just going into the building. Like I remember, like I was Mount Carmel. They had resources, but the buildings were falling apart.
Yeah.
And we would go into other places where it's just like, oh my God, this is like a college. Is this what college is like?
Yeah, like Argo. That's where I went.
And like going into these other buildings where it's just like really big and different, or it's just like, wow, what is this? It's like, the toilets aren't broken and things aren't like that. It's just like just basic facilities differences where you're looking at those things, and it just like that is even intimidating before you even get to see the uniforms that the other kids are playing with.
That's true.
With regard to resources and funding of certain schools, I'm curious, if you've seen changes with regard to that in specific districts. I know, you mentioned going to the suburban district and seeing the differences there. Have you seen improvements? Have you seen things stay the same? Obviously these make a huge difference in the ability of a school. So I'm just curious if you've seen kind of any changes with regard to funding in certain regions or school districts within Chicago and what those have looked like.
So he probably have more, well, not probably, he has more experience, but real quick, I would say that with the school I'm at, I coach volleyball, and just us having new uniforms changed the behavior in the building, in the school building. They held each other accountable. So that was something small, which was, I'm not going to say it's small. That was something big because it felt big to them. So just imagine more things. They want to do a camp. They want to do certain things. And I feel like if those things were offered, then they would do it. Also, if those things are offered, I'm sure teachers would do it, but not for a penny, if that makes sense.
Well,
if the teachers are being paid to do those extra curricular, I'm sure they'll do it.
Yeah, but here's the other thing too. Like think back to the sports athletes when they have their camps over the summer and stuff like that. The kids that are going are the rich kids who have access to those things.
Yeah.
It's not the inner city kids.
Yeah.
And so like going back to that, where it's just like if they had those resources given to them and the access for them. But I've seen they might have been ill-gotten gains, but I've seen some charter schools have brand new buildings put in because certain Latino politicians were able to funnel money into them and stuff like that, to where it's like we walk in those buildings like, oh my God, they have like little lounge areas for students to study, and huge gym and stuff like that, and nice facilities.
Great lighting.
Yeah. And the students are comfortable. They don't have to worry about, like, I know they did just simple things like fixing the windows and stuff like that. And putting trying to put air conditioners in all the schools made a big difference, to where it's just like, because if you can't be comfortable, how can you learn? And they finally focus on some of those things, but there's a lot more for infrastructure. A lot of the schools in the city of Chicago, that those schools are old.
Yeah.
Really old.
Because I did summer school, worked at a different school over the summer, last summer, and I noticed that the kids don't have to sit at desks. They can lay on the floor, because some kids may like to learn laying on their belly, taking their notes or whatever. So they didn't have to sit at desks. They had different things around the classroom that is not a normal classroom, but we're living in a different era. So things if you feel comfortable sitting on the floor, laying on the floor, taking notes, go ahead. They had dry erase boards on the wall.
Yeah.
They had high top tables if you prefer to sit up high. Like, it was just, I feel like it was able to hit all learning styles.
Yeah, because our science team, we went to, I think it was Solaria was the name of the school, and they had an infusion of money on a regular basis from a local business corporation, and the school was really nice. They had really great facilities. They had all kind of different resources and stuff like that, to where you could see how they impacted these students. And you could see how just that influx, if we were able to somehow get corporations and other donors to where just like make impactful changes, it's just like, I'm worried about, like, I have ratty carpet in my classroom that has asbestos and stuff like that. And, just trying to get rid of it seems like a major chore and impossibility.
Will, you described the honors program versus the non-honors program kids as like a creation of de facto segregation. I was curious if, like, how those conversations looked and sounded in the school district. Like, were they directly correlating the race?
They because there were students of color in there, they acted like that was okay. Like that was, we have some in there. But that didn't necessarily, they didn't acknowledge it or could not acknowledge it. Because whenever we had talks about race, because the population was mostly white teachers, whenever we tried to address those things, did not go well. Because like I said, they had a very strong teacher union. And usually those are, I've never had any good experience with a teacher union to help protect me and my benefits. Hardly ever. If it's to protect them and their agendas, they work for it. And if they have enough of their teachers to protect. But like, it was a real problem issue. Like my friend who was the assistant principal, I left in April that year because I couldn't handle it anymore. And then she, like a year, maybe she was there a year more. And they got rid of all the administration because the teachers just would not accept the idea of what they had there. And they couldn't like comprehend these things, just like, look, your test scores are crap and you don't want to make any changes. And you gotta stop blaming the kids for that problem. You gotta start looking at yourselves and how you're doing things. Because you can't keep on doing something the same way and expect
Different outcome. Insanity.
And so race was a real hard thing because I accept them for this or that. They're just not smart. Or this or that. I go, well, that's a racial statement in and of itself. So it just like, those concepts really flew over them. And it flies over my sister. So, it's just
Right.
like, I see it all the time where they don't understand that, where it's like, when it comes down to the base problem, it's not about race, it's about poverty. If we are able to equally distribute that wealth, so that people don't have to worry about a house and food and stuff like that before they even come into the school building, their education will be way far enriched.
We're getting to the point where we need to wrap, but I'm just curious if there are kind of final reflections or thoughts.
My goal, right, as an educator, and I agree about the poverty, my goal is to change the mindset of my scholars, because I think everything is a mindset, right? So if this is how I grew up and this is all I know. For example, I went to Jamaica. My kid was like, they have water? I'm like, huh? Yeah, they have water. So now I have to pause on what I'm teaching to show the resources that they have in Jamaica just to change the mindset. So that's my goal, to change the mindset of what we think is functional, but it's really dysfunction.
Mm-hmm. And I want to do the same thing with changing their mindset, because their mindsets now are, I could be a police officer, I could be a teacher, I could be a nurse. They don't have any idea of what real affluent careers are, because they don't have any exposure to them, because those careers are not in their communities. And if people in their communities have those careers, they left and they're not in that community anymore. Or they might come back and visit every now and then, but it's not the same. So being able to push them a little bit and expose them to there's other things outside this world, and there's other ways to get money and to have a career and be happy
Yeah.
besides just those things. And that's just sort of one of the things I've just sort of been able to do, because like I've had some teams that went nationally on things where we were able to, like academic teams where we went to like University of Knoxville, and kids being able to stay in the first time in a hotel and different things like that, and exposing them to the different things to where they say, hey, I could have a career as an engineer. I could have a career being a surveyor and stuff like that, and different careers that are exposing them to different skill sets and saying, hey, I enjoy this. That's sort of my goal, where just like I'm focusing on these things where I'm changing their mindset of like, there's just so much more there is.